that available for people. We now have recording available for people. It will be posted by the end of business tomorrow. And when I post it, I'll send out a link to everybody in case you want to go back and take a look at it. So let's go ahead and get started with the PowerPoint. And I'll make sure I catch anybody who comes in moving forward. So this version of the PowerPoint deals with evaluation. And what I plan on doing is going through a few slides that touch briefly on what occurred in the last webinar. And then we'll move to the evaluation section and answer any questions. I'm having a little delay time in the internet. So I'm using a functionality in Adobe Connect that builds the slides basically one segment at a time, and I apologize for that, but it's kind of the way business is happening today on the internet. So let's get started with today's agenda. We didn't want to go that far. Okay, we'll do a quick review of the application section. We'll do the outcome-based evaluations and provide questions and answers. So let's see what the next slide has for us. Okay, again, LSTA is a federal program. It's state-based. We have an LSTA 5-year plan, which is available on the NSLA website. And if it doesn't open up correctly for you, let me know. The program is funded annually by Congress. The applications are due by Friday, and we need one electronic version by email. And what we're asking for is the original PDF template filled out. Now, if you want to print that out, sign it, and send a second attachment in PDF, that's fine. But we need the original template filled out. We need one hard copy with signatures, original signatures, since we still are operating on that basis. For the last webinar on October 8th, we did need target audience and plans. So that webinar is available on YouTube. I can also make the PowerPoints available on the NSLA website, which just occurred to me I hadn't done yet. But I will make that happen in case you just want to print out a copy of them and look at them as a checklist. And then the final webinar is next Thursday, the 22nd. So what's coming up right now on the slide are some of the items that we've already touched on. In general information, the DUNS number, be sure that that's on your application, applicant information email addresses, and please be sure that we have one that will reach people. You can have more than one contact person if you want, the LSTA amount, and the persons served. So we've touched on that. And then we've touched on several other items. Which were abstract, need or opportunity, target audience, benefits to the target audience, LSTA goal, and planning documents, implementation. And this particular session is on evaluation. Outcome-based evaluation is a challenge for everybody. It's across the board, it's a challenge, and we understand that. So we're willing to work with you to come up with a minimum of one solidly written outcome for the outcome-based evaluation that the Institute for Museum and Library Services wants us to submit. So again, we've touched on project summary, the LSTA plan, project intent, primary audience, partnerships, and project need, including target population need, evidence of need, and connection to planning documents. I strongly encourage all of you to tie in your project need to your planning documents and to the LSTA 5-year plan. That goes a long way with the people who are evaluating it, so that they understand how you are mapping your project to those intended long-term vision and goals, whether it's local or whether it's statewide. And there's a lot of activity going on in Nevada right now with what's come out of the last legislature that you can certainly tie on to as well. So project activities and descriptions, I think we touched on those. Where we're headed in another slide is evaluation, outputs and outcomes. We'll eventually deal with budget category and timeline. Are there any questions at this point? Please feel free to type them in the chat box and I will respond to those best way I can. I'll give you 60 seconds or so. Okay, if you have questions while I am talking, please feel free to go ahead and keyboard them in. I'm seated in such a manner that I can, my eyes are going over to the chat box periodically and I'll catch those. So please feel free, and if you think of something after the session and want to send me an email, be sure to do that. A couple of emails have come in, just to remind you. I didn't respond to them earlier this week because I was at the Nevada Library Association meeting in Fallon, but I am catching up and will be back to you before Friday at 5. Oh. Okay, project outputs are measures of service and our products to be created or provided. And those are what we typically view in the library field as data. It's the number of circulations, the number of database sessions, it's the number of people who walk in the door. So it's the outputs that reflect the service being provided or the products being created. What we are looking for from all of you are project outcomes, that it be measurable. And this is a little softer approach to recording data. It can be qualitative and not quantitative. So qualitative being changes in knowledge, skills, and abilities, for example. So this is the one that we're positioned to help you with developing an outcome for your grant application, and we would encourage you to send in questions about them as soon as possible. The Government Performance and Results Act was the one that really started to drive this kind of evaluation. It's gone on for a while at the national level. I remember conversations about it when I first came to NSLAPR in 2004. And the intent is to make sure all public dollars are spent well, so that they support programs, they support services that meet the needs of the target audience. And United Way also is involved in measuring effect, service quality, and impact. So those are a couple of places where this began to be driven. So bear with me for a minute here. I want to, see, I have to work on the technology at this end so I don't do that to you. My apologies. Framing the evaluation. It is about effective programming, how the projects make a difference for the end user, such as changes in knowledge, skills, and abilities, stewardship of by the library on behalf of the target audience, be it the patrons of the public library, the students, whatever end user you're working with, and about transparency. And that's a big frame of today's world, where they are looking at open transparency for government, open data, so that the public knows where their tax dollars are going. It's not about process, it's not about efficiency, and it's not about staff performance, involving outcome-based evaluation. Those things can be framed within a different context, but right now we're talking about outcome-based evaluation. Okay, why outcomes? They are directly linked to the needs of the users. They demonstrate the project or program makes a difference. It identifies the program is worthy of funding or continued funding, and more grantors are requiring it. To really have people think through why they want the money and what impact that funding will have on their constituents. Okay, there are 4 steps to the outcome process. It's forming the evaluation, defining the goals and objectives, data collection, and writing it up. So we'll touch on all of these, and at some point we'll go to questions. So step 1 is identifying needs and documenting the context, informing your evaluation. And as you remember, we talked last week about identifying needs. So this kind of information that you're gathering, it's not buying books just because it's a nice thing, but it's buying books because why? And what are the available resources, and what are your program strategies? How are you going to go about completing and implementing this particular project to fit that bigger picture need? And that all becomes part and parcel of your evaluation. How do you know there is a need? Does it fit the LSTA goals, the library goals? And you hear me repeating over and over again about documenting the context for your application so it fits the planning documents you have locally. And that's part and parcel of how the reviewing council wants to see this. It's part and parcel of how we implement the LSTA program. So if you have a collection development plan, we expect to see it cited. What resources already exist? If you already have funding coming in to support a project, then how does that meet up and support what you're asking for from LSTA, LSTA funds? And then program strategies are program activities. So, keep in mind and make, sketch it out on a piece of paper about how you want to make all this stuff work. And I'll do the best I can to answer your questions. So if something seems puzzling to you, feel free to shoot me off an email. I mostly live off email, so I will pick it up. And if you don't get an answer from me within 24 to 36 hours, nudge me again, please. Okay, let's walk through an example where we have seniors who need web literacy. So the need is seniors in the community need web skills information. There are still a lot of people out there who don't surf the internet. And so you identify that particular target population, and you can scope it out in your community, for example, using U.S. Census Bureau information, or for those of you who are implementing civic technologies, data collection as part of a statewide project we have in play. That is a good place to go to get information to document your needs, if this is your topic. And I'm just using these as examples. So then you identify your LSTA plan goal and your library plan or mission goal, your resources, your collection, your staff, and your community. And when I want to go back and reinforce, we also have a state data center, and some of you at the NLA conference would have met Diane Lightwood. If not, her email address is on the website, NSLA website, and she can help you with the U.S. Census Bureau information. And yes, Lynn, Community Connect is awesome in terms of how it really analyzes the data down at a level we've never been able to do before as a library community. So your program activities include classes and collection development. And what kind of classes and what kind of outcomes do you have for those classes? Okay, so one of my favorite exercises, and I say that with a slight roll of the eyes, but it's writing goals and objectives. And I say that too with a quiet smile because I realize how important it is, but also, it's a bit of a challenge. And I think that once you do it several times, you'll get into the swing of it and be able to really be good at doing that. Writing goals and benefits, objectives, which are activities, and these generate evaluation questions so you can measure some outcomes. Remember, the goal is the big picture. It's what do you want this project to achieve at the end of the project. At the end of the day, what's it going to look like? Objectives are specific actions or events linked to that goal. And then you can, in the planning process, then you can go down to tasks and activities. There's so many models of planning processes that goals and objectives really are what we're asking from. Okay, and we'll get some examples up here on the screen. Web literacy for seniors, enhance web literacy among seniors of the community. That is a goal. And the objectives and activities are information classes, one-on-one training, expanding the resources, connecting with program partners. So these slides will give you some suggestions about what you can actually expand out in your document. And that's why it occurred to me I need to get the PowerPoint up, as well as the recorded webinar. So for outcomes, what's the impact on the end user? And impacts, classically, in this particular form of evaluation, as I alluded to earlier, include changes in behavior, attitude, skills, knowledge, condition, or status. So an outcome evaluation is user-centered approach to assessment of programs, services that have been designed to achieve a change for the user. And if you can articulate and document that, that is a way you can also use that information to approach your funding authorities locally, or your local legislators. So it shows them that you are well organized in how you're approaching all of these projects and your services. So select the outcome, you identify intended participants, you pick one good outcome. Is it measurable? Is it short term? Remember that these projects are 1 year in duration, so you need to be able to design your project to fit in that 12 months and give yourself enough time to evaluate it. So say, for example, the project fits in 11 months and you take a month to evaluate it, but keep it focused and keep it so that you get back what you need for the evaluation, but it's doable in the time frame that the LSTA grant sets. And does the library or program already collect the data? And there are, the public libraries in the room. They collect data for the public library statistics that's submitted to U.S. Census Bureau. Again, those of you with the Civic Technologies Project will have data collected. There's various ways to handle it, and if you need to talk out or ask questions about it, let us know. Okay, the outcome is about the users. It's not about just buying books. It is about how those books are used to enhance the users. You can begin the sentence with the target group. Outcome verbs are know, understand, increase, improve, decrease, reduce, expand. It's not activity based. So keep that in mind. Make sure that it's specific and measurable. And output statements or program operations are not part of this evaluation process. So it's great that you collect data and it's useful, but any data that's collected really has to be framed within the identified outcome. So if we go back to our example about seniors and web literacy, the overall outcome is seniors of the community will gain web skills to access the internet with ease. One manageable outcome would be workshops designed to teach online skills to seniors. That's a planned program. The outcome is seniors who take the workshop will learn basic internet navigation skills. See the kind of the play in the wording and how the language is set in this particular slide. Okay, step 3, data collection. You need to make sure you have a plan in play, that your methods of collecting data are practical, that you have a schedule for it, and a target for change. And so to design the outcome plan, what method will capture the change, the most direct, and consider what already exists so that you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. The schedule needs to be time-based and event-based. And consider patron input. That is voluntary, and you need to consider privacy and confidentiality and costs. How much is this process going to take in terms of whether it's time or other kinds of costs. So there is existing data, and I've said that a couple of times. You have your integrated library system with your registration and circulation. You have your reference statistics. If you have a library website, you can get Google Analytics, for example, to help you identify how many page hits you had. Library resources, print and electronic. You can work with your vendors to ensure that you gather your library statistics. And those of you using statewide databases, if they're part and parcel of what people are using and you wanted to define that impact, you certainly have the right to get an account with the vendors, administrative account with the vendors, and collect data. That is a local decision, and every vendor that we go out for bid for from the state level is required to make that stuff available. Whoever you negotiate with locally as a vendor, you need to talk to them about it. And modifications, possible. Something to think about. Okay, for surveys, a lot of us use SurveyMonkey. Just a suggestion to pay attention on things like SurveyMonkey regarding confidentiality. And you can certainly set that to make sure that it respects the confidentiality of people doing the survey. But the information is from the participant's perspective, and it can be subjective, so you need to take that into consideration. Surveys self-administered. Easy to analyze. Pardon me, I'm writing somebody's name down. Caution, watch the language and keep it neutral. Questions need to be understandable, and do a pilot test. And I think one of the things that's really, I mean, these are two little suggestions that are worth considering, is keeping the language neutral, because you don't want to impact and influence how they respond. You want them to respond in the way they best need to respond. And frame the questions so they're understandable. And I think that's one of the things we don't often practice as much as we could. And so it's a matter of just stepping back and thinking through the things that you need to do to keep things understandable. If you're going to do an interview, the information again is from the participant's perspective. You need predefined questions, and make sure clarification is possible. One of my favorite words in the communication process is clarification. Allow for follow-ups. So it's sort of like what I'm doing with questions here, and I'm saying to all of you, if you don't think about it online and you're in the chat room, feel free to send it to me later. Anecdotes possible. You know, some of the most powerful stories that are out there that will help influence the usage of the products or the impact. There was one where somebody, I forget their name, but they're now a judge in Reno, grew up in Humboldt County and used the bookmobile. And those kinds of, and he's gone on to be very successful, and those kinds of stories help support documenting the value or need of what we all do. Interviews can be labor intensive, so you got to be willing to commit to that process, but then maybe you focus it so that while it's labor intensive, you get what you want out of it. And will individuals want to participate? That is also, you know, something to take into consideration. Self-report and observation. You know, best for objective kinds of items. Will participants respond is a good question. Will they provide anecdotes? And got to be cautioned, especially in today's world, about accuracy. I think we've had a shift in some paradigms, and that's all. That's fine. It's okay. But just kind of pay attention to some of these kinds of tips about objective items and caution about accuracy. Observation works if a change or behavior is observable. There's no direct questions. The observer may need some training so they know how to pick up what's going on in the set of dynamics, and privacy issues may come into play. Tests are another way to measure knowledge and skill changes in a class or workshop setting. And pre-tests already exist. So what skills are already there in a pre-test, and then do a post-test so you can see what the changes are. They're easy to analyze and usually credible. So that is something to consider. And development may be needed in order to build those tests. So what's your target for change? Numerical, reasonable, baseline available, realistic. So what are you doing now? And what's realistic about how you would like to see changes to occur? Because if the target is set too high, it might not be achievable. And then that becomes another set of discussions as well. And, you know, identify changes in skills or behavior. You don't have to list every single one of them. You can pick one and take a look to see if it's measurable. And yeah, Google Drive does make building surveys quite easy. I'm aware that they exist on Google. I've never played with it before. I've usually been involved in something like SurveyMonkey, but it's Google Drive is well worth exploring. So back to seniors and web literacy. Methods, complete searching exercise, self-report anecdotes at each workshop for seniors on the internet. There are 3 of them. Target for change, 75% of participants will be able to activate a search engine, enter a topic, and print out an example for the trainer, and you plan to reach 60 seniors during the program. So in your community and the audience you serve in your community, is this realistic? Well, could be. And so identifying the outcome becomes part of that process. So let me fill this screen back up again. Okay, web literacy for seniors. You enhance the web literacy among seniors of the community is a goal. Informational classes, one-on-one training, expand resources, connect with program partners. The senior center in town, the VA, local churches, whatever works in your arena. Step 4, writing it up. Evaluation starts at the beginning with the need and the target population. So that's why we make such an emphasis on that. And integrate it with the implementation so that you have assigned responsibility, communication, and a timeline. So you build it in as part and parcel of your process. And this takes it up to the higher level of project management, which is something we all do. We don't always articulate how it looks because we do it by instinct, but there is a framework to all of this. So for the application, be sure that, I didn't want to do that. For the application, be sure you document the results you expect, the data that will be collected, what records will be kept, who is responsible, and when evaluation will take place. So that's clearly articulated, because when you write that grant application and you get all these pieces outlined very carefully in the grant, then that becomes your roadmap for the implementation year of the project, and you can use that roadmap to keep yourself and your staff and your colleagues on track. So you can evaluate the whole project, and you can use outputs to do that. Make sure you list all the project services, activities, and products, but you choose one outcome and use the best estimate for the target. Be realistic. In today's world, you need to set it so that you know you can achieve it, and stretch maybe a bit, but not so far that you can't achieve it. And so part of our job here at NSLA PR is to work with you over the course of the year to make sure that you can monitor and keep that on track. So if you have questions about implementation, you know where to find us. Be specific on data sources, method, and intervals. You know, if you're using civic technologies or the public library statistics or U.S. Census or the National Clearinghouse for Educational Statistics or National Center for Educational Statistics, I forget what the C stands for at the moment, but if you use that, let us know where you're pulling the statistics from. Writing it up, the final report, you need to interpret the data, you look for patterns, you tie it into your project goal. So that if there's unintended consequences that come up, it happens. One of the meetings I attended recently was for a newspaper project that's being co-implemented between UNLV, UNR, and NSLAPR, and the Library of Congress program manager for the newspaper project was working with the group, and it really reaffirmed for me when she flat out said, things happen. You need to stay on task, you need to drive the project, things happen. So you need to document that and stay in contact with the consultants here at the State Library Archives and Public Records. So if there's obstacles, talk to us. Document them, see if you can work around them, go over them, go under them, go around them. But if you're faced with having to go through them, give us a call. We'll talk about it. Communication. Target audience during the project completion, reach the goal. Communicate that in your final report and your next steps. So, part of my suggestions in this slide was, if you find obstacles, talk to us during the course of the year, but you're going to also need to identify those as part of your final report. So, it's a wrap. Quick overview. There's an evaluation section, outcome-based evaluation. There's 4 steps: forming the evaluation, defining goals and objectives, data collection plan, and writing it up. I would strongly encourage you to grab the LSTA Grant Application Procedures Manual that's linked on the NSLA website for 2016. And again, I'll make sure that these PowerPoints are loaded. They'll be in PDF format. So you have some checklists, and you can go back and cross-check to make sure you fill in that grant application. And the grant application blocks are scoped, so that, as I said to you last week, we need to focus the amount of writing that we do, but keep it focused, keep it on target, and keep it, to the point, so that you say what you need to say and it gets across to the reviewing panel. Are there any questions? Great, it looks like Lois is typing, so we'll hang on here. Lois, if you're applying for a grant up to $5,000, that is a mini grant application, exactly. It is a mini grant. So, and there are 2 different forms on the website. So be sure to catch the one that says mini grant. Oh. So my contact information is on the screen. You know where to find me, 775-684-3324, and kstar@admin.nv.gov. And Sue Lynn Jones, who is program administrative support program assistant for library development, is also available to answer some basic questions about logistics and the like. So she is 684-3340, and her email address, which I didn't get up here, but you've already seen hers if you've been involved in the proposal process, is Sulin, S-U-L-I-N, Jones, all one word, at admin.nv.gov. And she's typing. And yeah, she got it up in the chat box for you. So we will, the final PowerPoint, and I'm still tweaking these a bit, so the final PowerPoint should be exactly where we need it to be, and it'll include her name as a contact person as well. Phone number 684-3340. Any other questions? Okay, part of what we often do, ask you to do, and actually I'm going to move some links over to the 2016. They are in the 2015 section of the LSTA grant applications section of our website, are things about giving credit to the Institute for Museum and Library Services for the funding. So this is an example of the language that we ask you to use when you're implementing your project to show where the funding came from. Okay, that's the last slide. If there are no other questions, I am going to stop the recording and thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy day to participate. And so Lynn and I will get this stuff up. Oh, there's Lynn. Okay, you're welcome, Lynn. So we'll get this up and on the website. And if you, again, one more time, if you have questions, let us know. Thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon.